Working as a maid on a luxury yacht, the woman froze when she realized the millionaire was her husband who died 7 years ago. She walked closer and Teresa Caldwell's weathered hands worked methodically, tucking the Egyptian cotton sheets with hospital corners into the bed of the luxury yacht. 7 years of working as a maid on the opulent vessels that dotted Key West's turquoise waters had given her a precision that the wealthy passengers never noticed but always expected. "Mrs. Caldwell, we need you on the main deck," crackled the radio clipped to her uniform. "The new owners arriving in 20. Teresa sighed, smoothing her apron. At 38, the name Mrs. Caldwell still sent a pang through her chest. A widow who wasn't technically a widow. A woman who'd once believed she'd grow old in a modest beachfront cottage with the man she loved. Not scrubbing the decks of floating mansions owned by people who spent more on champagne in a night than she made in a month. "On my way," she replied, casting one last glance around the immaculate stateroom. As she made her way up to the deck, the Florida sun beat down mercilessly. The gleaming white yacht, the St. Helena, had just arrived from Europe, apparently owned by some reclusive American billionaire. Another day, another wealthy boss who wouldn't remember her name. From her apron pocket, her phone buzzed. The hospital. Again. Her stomach clenched as she checked the message. "Miss Caldwell, a reminder that Lucy's medication needs to be refilled. The new formula costs $100. Please confirm if you'd like to proceed." Teresa closed her eyes briefly. $1,800, almost 2 weeks' salary. But Lucy needed it. Her 6-year-old daughter with the ever-present smile despite the genetic disorder that had been slowly claiming her since birth. Teresa texted back a quick confirmation. She'd figure it out. She always did. "All hands on deck, Mr. Caldwell is arriving," shouted Captain Reynolds. Teresa froze. Caldwell. It had to be a coincidence. Caldwell wasn't an uncommon name. It couldn't possibly be connected to those Caldwells. The family that had rejected her with contempt when Gabriel disappeared. The powerful dynasty that had called her a gold digger, when all she'd wanted was their help finding their son, her husband, lost at sea during that strange, sudden storm. The yacht's crew lined up as the sleek black tender approached. Teresa took her place at the end of the line, eyes down as protocol demanded. The tender pulled alongside, and the yacht's owner stepped aboard with the fluid grace of someone born to wealth. "Welcome aboard the St. Helena, Mr. Caldwell," the captain announced. "Thank you, Captain. Looking forward to exploring the Keys." That voice, Teresa's head snapped up. Protocol forgotten. The world tilted dangerously beneath her feet. Standing before her, in an impeccably tailored linen suit, was Gabriel, her Gabriel. The same olive skin, the same deep-set eyes, the same way of standing with weight shifted slightly to the right. But it couldn't be. Gabriel had been declared dead years ago. His body never recovered after his fishing boat was found splintered on the rocks after the storm. This man was introduced as Nathan Caldwell, a distant relation to the Boston Caldwells, the very family that had shut their doors in Teresa's face when she'd come to them, pregnant and desperate. The man, Nathan, moved down the line of staff, shaking hands, nodding politely. As he approached Teresa, his eyes showed no recognition, just the practiced politeness of the extremely wealthy. "And you are?" he asked. "Teresa Caldwell, sir. I handle the cabins and personal quarters." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Something flickered across his face, so briefly she might have imagined it. "Caldwell, any relation?" His tone was casual, but there was a tightness around his eyes. "My husband's family, sir. He was lost at sea some years ago." The words came automatically, practiced through years of brief explanations. Nathan Caldwell held her gaze a beat too long. "I'm sorry for your loss." Then he was moving on, discussing itineraries with the captain, while Teresa stood rooted to the spot, heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't him. It couldn't be him. Gabriel was dead, his fishing boat shattered, his body claimed by the sea 7 years ago, leaving her alone with their unborn child. But as she watched Nathan Caldwell gesture with his left hand, she noticed it. The slight stiffness in his ring finger, the result of a break that hadn't healed properly after a fishing accident when Gabriel was 19. That night, after finishing her shift, Teresa sat on the edge of her bed in the tiny apartment she shared with Lucy. Her daughter slept soundly for once. the new medications temporarily holding the symptoms at bay. On the bedside table sat the last photo taken of Gabriel, his arms wrapped around Teresa's shoulders as they stood on his modest fishing boat. The Lucy Star, named in anticipation of their daughter, Teresa traced the outline of his face in the photograph, then reached for her laptop. She typed Nathan Caldwell into the search engine. Articles appeared. A reclusive investment genius who'd emerged from nowhere 10 years ago, who rarely gave interviews, and was known for his philanthropy almost as much as for his business acumen. A photo loaded, Nathan Caldwell accepting some business award, his face partially turned from the camera. The same strong jawline, the same slight crease between the eyebrows. "Mom," Lucy's small voice came from the doorway. "I had the dream again." Teresa quickly closed the laptop and opened her arms. Lucy climbed into her lap, her small body too light, too fragile. "The one about the boat?" Teresa asked, brushing Lucy's dark curls back from her forehead. Curls so like Gabriel's. Lucy nodded. "I was on a big boat with you and a man was there. He was sad, but when he saw me, he smiled." Teresa's throat tightened. Lucy had never met her father, yet these dreams had started coming more frequently in recent months. "Time for sleep, sweetheart. You have doctor's appointment tomorrow." As Teresa tucked Lucy back into bed, her mind raced. Tomorrow, she'd be back on the SAT. Helena. Tomorrow, she'd find a way to look more closely at Nathan Caldwell. If there was even the slightest chance. Her phone pinged with a text from the hospital administrator. "Dr. Morrison needs to discuss Lucy's latest test results. Urgent." Teresa's hand trembled as she set down the phone. Whatever game was being played, whatever secrets were being kept, she would uncover them. For Lucy, for the little girl who'd never known her father but somehow dreamed of him anyway. For the child whose time was running out. The morning sun glinted off the St. Helena as Teresa made her way up the gangplank, her mind racing with possibilities. She'd barely slept, Lucy's doctor's appointment weighing heavily on her thoughts alongside the impossible coincidence aboard this yacht. She'd worked extra shifts to afford a babysitter today, Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs, a kind elderly woman who adored Lucy, because Teresa needed answers. "Morning, Caldwell," said Reynolds, the first mate, as she signed in. "The boss wants his quarters spotless. He's particular about his things. Don't move anything out of place." Teresa nodded, clutching her supply caddy tighter. Understood. Her heart hammered as she approached the owner's suite. The door was ajar, voices drifting out. "Don't understand why we had to come to Key West of all places," a woman's voice complained. "It's so provincial. We could have gone to Saint-Tropez instead. Business before pleasure." "Victoria," came Nathan's reply. That voice so hauntingly familiar it made Teresa's skin prickle. "I told you, I have investments to check on." Teresa knocked softly on the doorframe. "Enter," Nathan called. She stepped into a stateroom larger than her entire apartment. Nathan Caldwell stood by the window in casual linen pants and a crisp white shirt, while a willowy blonde lounged on the king-sized bed, flipping through a magazine. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. I'm here to service your quarters." Nathan turned, and Teresa felt it again. That jolt of recognition, in the morning light. The resemblance was even more striking. The same deep-set eyes, though Nathan's held none of the warmth Gabriel's had when he looked at her. The same strong jaw, the same way of standing with his weight shifted slightly to one side. "Ah, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, and she noticed a slight hesitation before her name. "We'll get out of your way." The blonde, Victoria, gave Teresa a dismissive glance. "Make sure you use the lavender spray on the linens, not that cheap citrus stuff." "Yes, ma'am." When they left, Teresa began her work methodically, all while studying the room for any clue. A man's personal space could reveal so much. Gabriel had been neat but absent-minded, often leaving half-finished books splayed open, or sketches of boat designs on napkins. This room was immaculate, too perfect, like a hotel room that had never been truly lived in. On the desk sat a single-framed photograph, Nathan with an older man Teresa recognized from her research, Stanley Caldwell, the Boston patriarch, whose face had twisted with disgust when she'd appeared on his doorstep 7 years ago, pregnant and desperate. In the photo, Stanley's hand rested possessively on Nathan's shoulder. Neither smiled. Teresa moved to the closet, opening it to hang freshly laundered shirts. She ran her fingers along the row of expensive clothing, stopping at a worn leather jacket that stood out among the designer labels. Gabriel had owned one just like it, a relic from his college days that he'd refused to part with. Her hands trembled as she reached for the inside pocket, where Gabriel had always kept. The door opened suddenly. Teresa jerked back, nearly knocking clothes from their hangers. Nathan stood in the doorway, watching her with narrowed eyes. Looking for something specific, Teresa fumbled for composure. Just hanging your laundry, sir. Do you prefer wooden or padded hangers for your jackets? His expression remained unreadable. Wooden, always wooden, just like Gabriel preferred. Of course, sir, she nodded, turning back to her task, feeling his eyes on her back. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. You said your husband was lost at sea? He asked suddenly. Teresa's hands stilled. Yes, 7 years ago. What was his name? She turned to face him, searching his expression. Gabriel Caldwell. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, panic. It was gone too quickly to identify. Any relation to the Boston Caldwells? His tone was casual, but there was nothing casual about the intensity of his gaze. By marriage, they weren't pleased with the match. Nathan nodded slowly. Old money families rarely approve of outsiders. A voice called from the corridor. Nathan, we're going to be late for the lunch reservation. Coming, he called back, then hesitated. I'll leave you to your work, Mrs. Caldwell. The way he said her name, like it belonged to someone else later that afternoon. As Teresa polished the brass fixtures in the master bathroom, she accidentally knocked a toiletry bag from the counter. Its contents spilled across the marble floor. Expensive colognes, a razor, and a small plastic case. The case popped open, revealing a worn leather cord with a small carved wooden pendant. Teresa gasped, her knees giving way as she sank to the floor. The pendant was a tiny star, identical to the one she had carved for Gabriel from driftwood the day they found out she was pregnant. She had named their unborn daughter Lucy that same day, after the brightest star in the sky. The Lucy star, Gabriel had whispered, touching her still flat stomach. He'd worn the pendant every day after, promising never to take it off. Teresa's hands shook as she held the impossible artifact. The edges were worn smooth from years of handling. She turned it over, heart stuttering when she saw the tiny T-plig she had etched into the back. Mrs. Caldwell. Teresa scrambled to replace the items, but she wasn't quick enough. Nathan stood in the doorway, his face draining of color when he saw what she held. Where did you get this? She whispered for a moment. He looked trapped, vulnerable, an expression she'd seen on Gabriel's face only once. When his fishing boat had been caught in a sudden squall and he thought they might not make it back to shore, then his expression hardened. That's private property. I'd appreciate if you put it back where you found it. It's impossible, Teresa said, rising to her feet. My husband had one exactly like this. I made it for him myself. A coincidence, I'm sure. His voice was cold, detached. Many craftsmen make similar trinkets in coastal towns. I carved our initials on the back, she said, turning it over in her palm. T&G, Teresa and Gabriel. Nathan's jaw tightened. Mrs. Caldwell, I don't know what you're implying, but I suggest you complete your duties and leave my personal items alone, unless you'd prefer to seek employment elsewhere. The threat was clear. Teresa carefully placed the pendant back in its case, her mind racing as she bent to retrieve the last fallen item, a silver money clip. She noticed a distinctive scar on Nathan's wrist as his sleeve rode up, a jagged white line that disappeared beneath his expensive watch. Gabriel had gotten that scar at 19, when a fishing line carrying a heavy hook had sliced deep into his flesh. Will that be all, sir? She asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the earthquake happening inside her. Yes, he said curtly. And Mrs. Caldwell, Helena will be departing for Europe in 2 weeks. I suggest you use your remaining time aboard wisely. After her shift ended, Teresa sat on a bench overlooking the marina, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Lucy asking for you, doctor called again. Teresa stared at the massive yacht gleaming in the fading light. The man aboard that vessel had Gabriel's voice, Gabriel's mannerisms, Gabriel's scar, and a pendant she had made with her own hands. Either she was losing her mind, or Gabriel Caldwell was alive, living as someone else. With no acknowledgement of the wife and daughter he'd left behind, Teresa's sneakers squeaked against the hospital's polished linoleum floors as she rushed down the pediatric wing. She was 15 minutes late for Lucy's appointment. Traffic had been backed up on Roosevelt Boulevard, and her mind had been so preoccupied with thoughts of Nathan Caldwell that she'd missed her usual turnoff. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said breathlessly as she entered the examination room where Lucy sat swinging her legs off the edge of the table, a nurse taking her vitals. "Mommy." Lucy's face lit up, her smile revealing a missing front tooth, a normal childhood milestone that had seemed like a victory in their battle against her disease. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Dr. Morrison nodded, his expression giving nothing away. After 6 years of appointments, Teresa had learned to dread that poker face. It usually preceded bad news. "How's our girl doing today?" Teresa asked, dropping a kiss on Lucy's forehead. "I got to see the fish tank," Lucy announced proudly. "There's a new blue fish that looks like Dory." "That's great, sweetie," Teresa turned to the doctor. "Your message said it was urgent." Dr. Morrison nodded toward the hallway. "Lucy, how about you color a picture while I talk to your mom? Nurse Jenkins has some new markers." "Out in the hallway, doctor." Morrison didn't waste time on pleasantries. "The latest blood work shows accelerated progression. Her enzyme levels have dropped by 30% since last month." Teresa steadied herself against the wall. "But the new medication is helping, but not enough. The genetic mutation is causing more rapid deterioration than we initially projected." He handed her a folder of test results filled with numbers and charts that might as well have been written in Sanskrit. "At this rate, without intervention, we're looking at complete organ failure within 3 to 5 months. The world tilted beneath Teresa's feet. 3 to 5 months. Lucy had just started kindergarten. She was learning to read. She had a loose tooth. She was hoping the tooth fairy would visit for. "What intervention?" Teresa managed, her voice hollow. "You said there's no cure." "There isn't," Dr. Morrison confirmed. "But there is a transplant option we haven't discussed before because finding a compatible donor is extremely difficult with Lucy's blood type and genetic markers." Hope flickered dangerously in Teresa's chest. "What kind of transplant?" "Bone marrow primarily, but possibly partial liver as well. The issue is compatibility. Given the rarity of Lucy's specific genetic markers, our best chance would be a direct blood relative." Teresa's mind instantly went to Gabriel, Lucy's father, her biological father, who might be living on a yacht less than 3 miles from where they stood right now. "I'm not a match," Teresa said. "We tested when she was first diagnosed." "No, but her father might be." Dr. Morrison hesitated. "I know this is a sensitive subject, Mrs. Caldwell, but even if your husband is deceased, he might have had siblings, parents. His family refused to help us," Teresa said flatly. "They wanted nothing to do with Lucy or me after Gabriel disappeared." Dr. Morrison sighed. "Then we'll need to look at the National Registry, but I want to be honest with you. The chances of finding a perfect match in time are slim. How much would this transplant cost if we found a donor?" The doctor named a figure that made Teresa's knees buckle. Even with her insurance, the out-of-pocket costs would be astronomical. "There are financial aid programs," Dr. Morrison offered. "I'll have our social worker contact you." Teresa nodded numbly, her mind already calculating how many extra shifts she could pick up, what else she could possibly sell. "Can I see my daughter now?" Back in the examination room, Lucy had drawn a picture, a stick figure family of 3 standing on what appeared to be a boat. "Is that us?" Teresa asked, forcing brightness into her voice. "Uh-huh." Lucy pointed to each figure. "That's you, that's me, and that's my dad." Teresa's heart seized. "Lucy, I know he's in heaven," Lucy said matter-of-factly, "but in my dream, he was on a big boat like the one you work on." Teresa stared at her daughter, wondering if some kind of cosmic connection existed between Lucy and the father she'd never met. Or perhaps it was simply that Teresa had mentioned working on yachts so often that Lucy's imagination had incorporated them into her dreams about the father she'd never known. "Do you remember what he looked like in your dream?" Teresa asked carefully. Lucy scrunched her nose. "He was tall, and his eyes were like mine. Gabriel's eyes, that distinctive hazel that shifted between green and gold depending on the light. The same eyes that had stared at Teresa with cold unfamiliarity from Nathan Caldwell's face." Lucy's cough interrupted her thoughts, a wet, rattling sound that hadn't been there the week before. Teresa's chest tightened as she rubbed Lucy's back. feeling the sharp edges of her shoulder blades through her thin t-shirt. Later that evening, after tucking Lucy into bed with an extra dose of her medication, Teresa sat at their small kitchen table surrounded by bills, insurance forms, and the calendar where she tracked Lucy's medications. Her phone pinged with a text from her supervisor on the yacht. "Need you early tomorrow. Owner hosting breakfast party. 6 a.m. sharp." Teresa closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. 6 a.m. meant arranging for Mrs. Rodriguez to take Lucy to school. Another favor she couldn't really afford to ask. Her gaze fell on Lucy's drawing from the hospital. The boat, the family, the man with eyes like Lucy's. Teresa pulled out her laptop and typed Nathan Caldwell Boston into the search engine again. This time, she dug deeper, looking at news archives from around the time Gabriel disappeared. An article from a Boston Society page caught her attention. Stanley Caldwell, chairman of Caldwell Maritime Industries, mourns the loss of nephew Nathan Caldwell, 32, in tragic sailing accident off the coast of Portugal. Nathan Caldwell, who had been living in Europe managing the company's Mediterranean interests, was presumed lost at sea when his sailing yacht failed to return to port during unexpected severe weather. The date of the article was just 2 weeks after Gabriel had disappeared. Teresa's fingers flew across the keyboard, searching for photos of the original Nathan Caldwell, but there were none. Just mentions in society pages about his work in Europe, his apparent love of sailing, his bachelor status. It was as if he'd been a ghost long before his reported death. Her phone rang. The hospital's billing department. "Mrs. Caldwell, we're calling about the new prescription for Lucy. Your insurance is denying coverage for the increased dosage. The out-of-pocket cost would be $2,400 for a month's supply." Teresa gripped the phone tighter. "I don't have that kind of money right now. Can we appeal? Or is there an alternative medication? The doctor has indicated this is the only effective option at this stage. We can start an appeal, but it typically takes 30 to 60 days for a decision." 60 days, when Lucy might only have 90. After hanging up, Teresa stared at the yacht schedule pinned to her refrigerator. The salt. Helena was set to depart for Europe in 2 weeks. If Nathan was truly Gabriel, if by some miracle her husband was alive, she had 14 days to prove it. And if he was Gabriel, why was he pretending not to know her? Why had he abandoned them? And most importantly, would he be willing to save the daughter he'd never acknowledged? Lucy coughed again from her bedroom, that new, worrying rattle that made Teresa's heart race with fear. She checked the time. Nearly midnight. In 6 hours. She'd be back on that yacht, face to face with the man who might be her supposedly dead husband, the man who might be Lucy's only hope. The buzzing of Teresa's alarm at 4:30 a.m. felt like needles in her exhausted brain. She'd barely slept, torn between researching Nathan Caldwell's background and checking on Lucy's increasingly labored breathing throughout the night. "You're sure you can handle her morning routine?" Teresa asked Mrs. Rodriguez for the third time as she gathered her uniform. "Her medication is laid out by the sink. The blue pill needs to be taken with food. Go, Teresa." Mrs. Rodriguez shooed her toward the door. "I've raised 4 children and have 7 grandchildren. Lucy will be fine." Teresa kissed her sleeping daughter's forehead. Lucy's skin felt warm, not quite fever warm, but getting there. Another worrying sign. "Call me if anything changes. Anything at all." The pre-dawn air was thick with humidity as Teresa hurried toward the marina. The seat, Helena's lights glowed against the dark water. Crew members already scurrying about preparing for the breakfast party. As she climbed the gangplank, her mind raced with possibilities. Should she confront Nathan directly? Try to find more evidence? Somehow get a DNA sample to prove he was Gabriel? "You're late, Caldwell," snapped the head steward. "And you look like hell." "Sorry, my daughter was sick." "Save it. The guests arrive in an hour, and the owner wants everything perfect. Get to work on the upper deck table settings." Teresa worked mechanically, arranging silver flatware and crystal champagne flutes while her mind cataloged what she knew. The yacht was departing in 13 days. Lucy needed a transplant within 3 months. If Nathan was truly Gabriel, why was he pretending not to know his own wife? And why had he let her believe he was dead for 7 years? As she placed the last napkin, voices approached from the main stairwell. "I don't understand why you're so interested in that maid," Victoria's voice carried across the deck. "She's nothing special." "I'm not interested in her," Nathan responded, his tone carefully measured. "I just asked about her background." "Well, Captain Reynolds says she's a widow with a sick kid." "Quite the sob story. Is that why you're fixated on her?" Another charity case for the great Nathan Caldwell. Teresa froze, ducking behind a service cart as they emerged onto the deck. In the soft morning light, Nathan's profile was unmistakably Gabriel's. From the slight hook in his nose to the way his forehead creased when he was irritated. "Drop it, Victoria," he said with an edge to his voice that Teresa remembered all too well. Gabriel had rarely lost his temper, but when he did, that same dangerous quiet entered his voice. They moved to the railing, looking out at the harbor, their backs to Teresa. She should leave, finish her tasks elsewhere. But her feet refused to move. "Your father called again," Victoria said after a moment. "He wants us back in Boston by the end of the month for the engagement announcement." Teresa's heart stuttered. Engagement. This woman was his fiancée. "I told you I have business in Europe first," Nathan replied. "Business. Always business." Victoria touched his arm possessively. "When will you make time for us? For starting our family?" Nathan stiffened visibly. "I've been clear about not wanting children. And I've been clear that the Harrington legacy needs heirs. Just like the Caldwell legacy does." Victoria's voice hardened. "My father didn't agree to this merger of families just for you to end the bloodline." Teresa accidentally knocked a spoon from the cart. It clattered against the deck, and both Nathan and Victoria whirled around. I'm sorry," Teresa stammered. "I was just finishing the settings." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Were you eavesdropping?" "No, ma'am, I was—" "You were what?" Victoria stepped closer, her designer sundress fluttering in the morning breeze. "Skulking around listening to private conversations, Nathan. I want her fired." Nathan's expression was unreadable. "That won't be necessary, Victoria. I'm sure Mrs. Caldwell was just doing her job." The way he said, "Mrs. Caldwell," made Teresa's chest ache. There was something in his voice, a careful distance, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Well, make sure she does it elsewhere," Victoria sniffed, before stalking back toward the stairs. "I need to finish my makeup before the guests arrive." When Victoria was gone, Nathan turned to Teresa. For a moment, neither spoke. "I apologize for my fiancé," he finally said. "She can be difficult." "It's fine, sir. I'm used to it." Teresa hesitated, then added, "She mentioned your father. Stanley Caldwell is still alive." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "You seem to know a lot about my family." "Mrs. Caldwell. I researched the Caldwells after my husband disappeared," Teresa said carefully, "when they refused to help me find him, or to support his unborn child. Perhaps they had their reasons." His voice was tight. What reasons could justify abandoning a pregnant woman whose husband just disappeared? Teresa couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Stanley Caldwell looked me in the eye and said Gabriel had made his choice when he married me, and he wouldn't waste family resources looking for him, or supporting his mistake." Something flashed in Nathan's eyes, a raw pain that was gone so quickly Teresa might have imagined it. "I have guests arriving shortly. Mrs. Caldwell, this conversation is inappropriate." "My daughter is dying," Teresa said abruptly. Nathan froze. "The daughter Gabriel never met. She needs a transplant, and I'm running out of time to find a compatible donor." Nathan's face drained of color. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't see how I can help." "Can't you? Or won't you?" Teresa challenged, before he could answer. The yacht's security chief approached. "Sir, there's a situation at the gangway. A woman is insisting on speaking with you. Says she's your sister." Nathan's expression darkened. "I don't have a sister. She says her name is Sophia Caldwell." "Sir," Teresa's heart jumped. Sophia, Gabriel's younger sister, the only Caldwell who had shown Teresa any kindness 7 years ago, though even she had eventually stopped returning Teresa's calls. "I'll handle this," Nathan said grimly. "Make sure the guests are directed to the upper deck when they arrive." Teresa followed at a discreet distance as Nathan strode toward the gangway. At the bottom stood a slender woman in her early 30s, her dark hair swept into an elegant knot, designer sunglasses obscuring her eyes. Even from a distance, Teresa recognized Sophia Caldwell. "Nathan," Sophia called out. "Or should I call you Gabriel?" The entire deck went silent. Nathan glanced around sharply at the crew members who had paused in their tasks. "Clear the deck," he ordered. "Everyone out, now." As the crew scattered, Teresa ducked behind a lifeboat housing, her heart thundering. Sophia had just confirmed what she'd suspected. Nathan was Gabriel. "You shouldn't have come here," Nathan hissed when the deck was clear. "And you shouldn't have come back to Key West," Sophia retorted, climbing up the gangway uninvited. "What were you thinking? This is where it all happened, where she lives." "This is a business trip," Nathan replied stiffly. "Nothing more." "Bullshit." Sophia laughed bitterly. "I've been watching you for years, waiting for you to make a mistake, following the money you've been secretly sending to that account in Teresa's name." Teresa's hand flew to her mouth. The anonymous deposits that occasionally appeared in her account. The ones she'd assumed were from some forgotten insurance policy or distant relative who'd heard about Lucy's condition. "Keep your voice down," Nathan growled. "You have no idea what you're playing with, Sophia." "I know exactly what I'm playing with," Sophia said. "The question is, do you, Father, isn't going to be happy when he finds out you've been in contact with your old life?" "Father, Stanley Caldwell was alive?" Teresa's mind reeled. "I've never contacted them," Nathan said firmly. "And you're not going to either, if you know what's good for all of us. Then why are you here, in the exact town where your wife and daughter live?" Sophia challenged. "Teresa deserves to know the truth. Lucy deserves to know her father is alive. And what would that accomplish, besides putting them in danger?" Nathan's voice cracked slightly. "I made a deal. I stay dead. They stay safe." Teresa's knees weakened. She gripped the lifeboat housing for support. "Well, things have changed," Sophia said, her voice dropping so low Teresa had to strain to hear. "Lucy is sick, really sick. Teresa needs help, and you're the only one who can give it." Nathan's shoulders sagged. "How do you know about Lucy's condition?" "Unlike you, I never completely abandoned them," Sophia said. "I've been keeping tabs from a distance, making sure the anonymous donations went through. We had no choice," Nathan said quietly. "If Father knew I was in contact." "Father is the problem here," Sophia replied sharply. "Speaking of which, I have information about what really happened the night of the storm, about why he wanted you gone so badly. Meet me at the Mangrove Cafe tonight at 8. Come alone." With that, Sophia turned and descended the gangway, disappearing into the morning crowd beginning to fill the marina. Teresa stood frozen behind her hiding place, mind spinning with revelations. Gabriel was alive. He had been sending them money secretly, and most importantly, he claimed he had stayed away to keep them safe. From his own father, the breakfast party dragged on interminably. Teresa moved through her duties like a sleepwalker, pouring mimosas and clearing plates while her mind processed what she'd overheard. Gabriel was alive. He'd been living as Nathan Caldwell, and somehow, his father was connected to his disappearance. "Mrs. Caldwell, you've refilled that same water glass 3 times, the head steward hissed in her ear. "Get your head straight or get off this yacht." Teresa mumbled an apology and retreated to the galley. Her phone showed 2 missed calls from Mrs. Rodriguez. Her heart raced as she ducked into the storage pantry to return the call. "Teresa, Lucy's fever spiked. I gave her the medication, but she keeps asking for you." "I'll be there as soon as I can," Teresa promised. "Did you call Dr. Morrison?" "Yes. He said to bring her in if it goes above 102. It's hovering at 101.4 now." As Teresa ended the call, the ship's intercom crackled. "All non-essential staff, prepare for temporary shore leave. Owner's private meeting in the main salon at 1400 hours. Perfect. She could check on Lucy, then return for the evening shift. When she planned to find proof of Gabriel's identity once and for all, the storm rolled in unexpectedly that evening. Dark clouds gathered over Key West, lightning illuminating the horizon as Teresa made her way back to the marina. Lucy's fever had broken, but her cough had worsened, and Teresa had left her in Mrs. Rodriguez's capable hands only after Dr. Morrison prescribed a stronger antibiotic. The yacht was eerily quiet when she boarded. Most of the crew had taken advantage of the owner's meeting to extend their shore leave into dinner. "Where is everyone?" Teresa asked the security guard at the gangway. "Owner's at dinner in town. Skeleton crew only tonight." "Storm's going to be a bad one. You might want to head back home." Teresa shook her head. "I need to finish the turn-down service in the owner's suite." The guard shrugged. "Your funeral, Those mahogany floors get slippery when it's rough. In Nathan's Gabriel's suite, Teresa moved purposefully. She wasn't here to turn down beds. She was looking for definitive proof, something she could use to confront him. The yacht pitched slightly as the first strong winds hit. Teresa steadied herself against the bedpost, then continued her search. The closet first. She pulled out the leather jacket she'd noticed before, checking every pocket. Empty. Next, the desk. She rifled through papers. Business contracts, investment reports. Nothing personal. No photos of a life before Nathan Caldwell. The ship's intercom crackled. Attention all crew. Severe thunderstorm warning issued. Secure all loose items and prepare for heavy seas. Teresa ignored it. Pulling open desk drawers, bills, passport. Nathan Caldwell, born in Boston, age 40. 2 years older than Gabriel would be. Credit cards, all in Nathan's name. Then her fingers touched something in the back of the bottom drawer. A small compartment that slid open when pressed. Inside lay a worn photograph. Teresa's breath caught. It was her. 7 years younger, sun-kissed and laughing on the deck of Gabriel's modest fishing boat, her hands cradling her pregnant belly. Gabriel had taken it just weeks before his disappearance. She remembered the day perfectly. They'd been discussing baby names, eventually settling on Lucy. The yacht lurched violently. The lights flickered, then stabilized. Outside, rain began pelting the windows as thunder boomed. "You shouldn't be in here." Teresa whirled around, the photograph still clutched in her hand. Nathan, Gabriel, stood in the doorway, soaking wet, his eyes dark with emotion she couldn't read. "You shouldn't be alive," she countered, holding up the photograph. "Yet here we are." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Water dripped from his clothes onto the polished floor. "You need to leave now." His voice was low, dangerous. "Not until you tell me why you've been pretending to be dead for 7 years while your daughter suffers." Teresa stood her ground. "While I believed I'd lost you forever." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. Torment etched into every line. "Teresa, please." Her name on his lips was a plea. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then help me understand." She stepped closer, the photograph trembling in her hand. "Was our life together so easily abandoned? Did you ever even look for us after you became Nathan?" Pain flashed across his face. "Every day," he whispered. "I've watched over you both from a distance." "The money? Was that supposed to be enough?" Anger surged through her. Lucy needed a father, not anonymous deposits. The yacht pitched again as the storm intensified. They both stumbled, and Gabriel instinctively reached out to steady her, his hand warm and familiar on her arm. The touch sent electricity through her that had nothing to do with the lightning outside. "I didn't have a choice," he said hoarsely. "There's always a choice." Teresa pulled away. "You chose to let us think you were dead. You chose to become Nathan Caldwell. You chose to get engaged to another woman." His face hardened. "You don't know what happened that night, what they did, what they threatened to do if I ever contacted you. Then tell me." Gabriel turned away, running a hand through his wet hair, a gesture so achingly familiar it made Teresa's heart contract. "My father," he began, his voice barely audible above the storm. "He never approved of our marriage. He said you were beneath us, that you'd tarnish the Caldwell name." "I know that part," Teresa said impatiently. "He made his feelings clear when I came to him after you disappeared. What you don't know is that he orchestrated my disappearance." Gabriel's eyes met hers, haunted. The storm that night was just convenience. His men were waiting regardless. Teresa's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "My father had me kidnapped." "Teresa, he gave me an ultimatum. Disappear forever, assume a new identity, or they would make sure you and our unborn child met with an unfortunate accident." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Teresa's feet, and not from the storm. "He threatened to kill us." Gabriel nodded grimly. "Stanley Caldwell doesn't make idle threats. When my cousin Nathan died in that sailing accident, my father saw an opportunity. Nathan had been living in Europe for years. Few people knew him well. With the right documentation, the right plastic surgery for the details." He gestured to his face. A slightly altered nose, a chin adjustment. "Nothing major, but enough to create reasonable doubt if anyone from my old life saw me. But your own father would absolutely have us killed, Gabriel finished flatly. The Caldwell legacy is all that matters to him. A son who married beneath him was bad enough. A grandchild from that union, unacceptable. Teresa struggled to process this. But you're here now, in Key West. Why risk it? The yacht lurched violently. A vase crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. Because I needed to see you, Gabriel admitted, his voice breaking. When I inherited control of the company after his supposed death, I thought maybe. His supposed death. Teresa seized on the words. Stanley is alive. Gabriel's expression darkened. Very much so. He staged his own death 2 years ago to avoid prosecution for securities fraud. He lives in seclusion in a private medical facility the family owns. Only a handful of people know. Outside, lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The yacht pitched sharply, and Teresa was thrown forward against Gabriel. His arms went around her instinctively, steadying her. For a moment, they stood frozen, her face inches from his. The familiar scent of him, sea salt, and that particular soap he'd always used, overwhelmed her senses. If you really are Gabriel, she whispered, if this isn't some elaborate lie, then tell me something only he would know. His eyes searched hers. The night you told me you were pregnant, we were on the pier behind Schooner's Wharf. You were wearing that blue sundress with the frayed hem. You were terrified I'd be upset because we'd planned to wait. Instead, I picked you up and spun you around until you yelled at me to put you down before you threw up. Tears filled Teresa's eyes. Gabriel, I never stopped loving you, he whispered. Not for a single day. The ship rolled with another powerful wave. Outside, the storm raged, mirroring the tumult in Teresa's heart. If I'd known about Lucy's condition, Gabriel continued urgently, I would have found a way to help. Is she... How serious is it? Teresa met his gaze directly. She's dying, Gabriel. She needs a transplant, and the only compatible donors would be direct blood relatives. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You need me to be tested. Not just you, Teresa said quietly. Lucy's specific genetic markers are rare. The doctor says we need to test all possible relatives, including your father. Gabriel's face went ashen. That's impossible if he knew about Lucy. If he knew she was dying, Teresa challenged. Even Stanley Caldwell couldn't be that heartless. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the torment on Gabriel's face. You don't know my father, he said grimly, but there's something you should know about Lucy's condition. He hesitated. The rare genetic markers the doctors found. They run in the Caldwell bloodline. My father has the same condition. It's why he's in that medical facility now. Teresa stared at him, the implication sinking in. You mean... I mean that Stanley Caldwell is likely not just a compatible donor, Gabriel said. He may be the perfect match to save our daughter's life. The storm continued to batter the yacht. But inside Nathan's suite, a different kind of tempest raged. Teresa sank into a chair, trying to process Gabriel's revelation. Your father tried to have you killed, she whispered. His own son. Gabriel, she couldn't think of him as Nathan anymore, paced the cabin, water still dripping from his clothes. Not killed, not exactly. He ran a hand through his hair. The plan was to make me disappear, give me a new identity. The men he hired were supposed to stage my death, make it look like I'd been lost at sea. But something went wrong, Teresa prompted. Gabriel's laugh was hollow. The men he hired were Ramirez and Cortez. Teresa's eyes widened. Miguel Ramirez, your father's fishing buddies. The same. They'd known me since I was a boy. Gabriel's eyes clouded with the memory. They couldn't go through with it. Couldn't stage my death the way father wanted. But they also couldn't defy him completely. So what happened that night? Teresa leaned forward. I've replayed it in my mind 1,000 times. The forecast was clear. Then suddenly, that storm appeared out of nowhere. Gabriel's expression darkened. It was all orchestrated. The weather report was falsified. Locally, just for the fishermen, the harbor master was paid off. I was supposed to take my boat out, get caught in the unexpected storm, and disappear forever. But you knew the waters too well, Teresa said, understanding dawning. You would have seen the storm coming, turned back. Gabriel nodded. So Ramirez sabotaged my boat the night before, made sure I couldn't outrun what was coming. His voice dropped. I tried to radio for help when I realized, but the equipment had been tampered with too. The memory played across his face like a shadow. The boat broke apart on the rocks. I was pulled under. When I came to, I was on Ramirez's boat, miles offshore. They told me Father's ultimatum: become Nathan Caldwell and never contact you or our child again. Or they would finish the job, and you would be next. Teresa's hand instinctively went to her stomach, remembering the child she'd carried then. You believed them. I knew my father, Gabriel said grimly. The Caldwell legacy was everything to him. A son who married a nobody was bad enough, but a grandchild from that union. He couldn't allow it. So you agreed. I didn't have a choice. Gabriel's voice rose in anguish. They showed me photos of you, going to work, shopping at the market. They'd been watching for weeks, documenting your routines. They knew exactly how to reach you if I didn't cooperate. Teresa shuddered at the thought of being surveilled without knowing. They took me to Europe that same night, Gabriel continued. I was kept isolated for months while they constructed Nathan's identity. There was some cosmetic work. He gestured vaguely to his face. Nothing major, enough to create doubt if anyone from my past saw me. Your nose? Teresa said softly. It's straighter now. And the chin, a small scar removal. His hand touched his left eyebrow where a childhood scar had been. The rest was paperwork and stories. Learning to be Nathan, the cousin who'd lived in Europe for years, managing the family's Mediterranean shipping interests. But the real Nathan died in a sailing accident 2 years before. Few people knew him. He'd been in Europe since college. It wasn't hard to become him. Gabriel's voice was hollow. Father kept me under constant surveillance for years. Minders disguised as business associates. Weekly check-ins where he'd casually mention having people in Key West, watching you and Lucy. Teresa felt sick. All this time, when he staged his own death 2 years ago to avoid the securities fraud charges, I thought maybe I'd finally be free, but he made sure the trustees and executives knew the truth, that he was still pulling the strings from his private medical facility. I was still trapped. But you sent us money, Teresa said. How did you manage that without him knowing? A ghost of a smile touched Gabriel's lips. I learned a few things being Nathan Caldwell. Investment genius. Created a series of shell companies. Untraceable transfers. It wasn't much, but it kept us afloat, Teresa admitted. There were months we wouldn't have made rent without those deposits. Lightning flashed again. Closer now. The yacht creaked as another large wave hit. What about Sophia? Teresa asked suddenly. How did she figure it out? Gabriel sighed. She suspected from the beginning. Sophia never believed I'd die in a simple storm. I was too good a sailor when Nathan Caldwell suddenly appeared in the family. She started connecting dots. She's been helping us too, Teresa said. Keeping tabs, she said. Sophia was always the rebellious one. A fond smile crossed his face. Father could never control her completely. For a moment, they sat in silence, the gravity of the situation settling between them. Outside, the storm seemed to be intensifying rather than abating. Lucy looks like you, Teresa said suddenly. She has your eyes exactly. That same hazel that changes color depending on the light. Gabriel's face softened. Tell me about her, please. She's brilliant, stubborn, loves the water. I take her to the beach whenever she's strong enough. Teresa smiled despite herself. She draws constantly, always asking questions about everything. And she dreams about you. What? She has dreams about her father on a boat, even though she's never met you, never even seen a photograph. Sometimes I wonder if there's some kind of connection. Teresa hesitated. She drew a picture yesterday, the three of us on a boat together. Gabriel turned away, but not before Teresa caught the glimmer of tears in his eyes. Gabriel, she said, using his real name deliberately. Lucy is running out of time if your father has the same genetic markers. It's more than that, Gabriel interrupted, turning back to face her. It's the same condition, the same degenerative disorder. It's why he's in that facility instead of a regular hospital. It's a genetic mutation that runs in the Caldwell line. Teresa felt the blood drain from her face. You mean Lucy inherited this from your family? Why didn't you ever tell me it ran in your bloodline? Because I didn't know. Gabriel's voice cracked with emotion. Father kept it secret. He'd had treatment in Switzerland for years. I only found out after becoming Nathan, when I gained access to the family medical records. But you're healthy, Teresa said. You don't have the condition. No, it's a recessive trait. I'm a carrier like my mother was. Gabriel ran a hand over his face. Father never wanted anyone to know about the defect in the Caldwell line. It would tarnish the image of genetic superiority he was obsessed with. So all his talk about me tainting the family bloodline was projection, hypocrisy. Gabriel's jaw tightened. He was terrified that if you had my child, the condition might manifest. When I disappeared, he probably hoped you'd lose the baby from stress, or struggle so much financially that he couldn't finish the thought. Teresa felt rage building inside her. He wished his own grandchild dead, rather than risk the family reputation. And now that grandchild needs his help to survive, Gabriel said quietly. The cruelest irony. The yacht lurched violently with another wave. A loud thud came from the deck above, followed by shouts. We need to get off this boat, Gabriel said, suddenly alert. This storm is getting worse, and I need to meet Sophia. She said she had information about what really happened that night. What more could there be? Teresa asked. Gabriel's expression was grim. I don't know, but Sophia wouldn't have risked coming here without good reason. He moved to a cabinet, pulling out dry clothes. There's a launch that can take us to shore even in this weather. We'll go to the meeting point together. What about Victoria? Teresa asked. Your fiancé. Gabriel's face hardened. Victoria Harrington is as much a pawn in my father's games as I am. The engagement was his idea, a merger between families, not a marriage of love, and she agreed to this. Her father is as ruthless as mine, different methods, same priorities. Gabriel buttoned a dry shirt. We should go. The sooner we talk to Sophia, the sooner we can figure out how to approach my father about helping Lucy. Teresa stood, still clutching the photograph of herself on Gabriel's fishing boat. He tried to kill you once. What makes you think he won't try again if you defy him? Gabriel's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something beyond pain and regret, a quiet determination, a strength she remembered from the man she'd married. Because this time, he said, I have something worth fighting for. The rain hammered against them as Gabriel helped Teresa into the smaller launch boat. Despite the yacht's crew advising against departure in such weather, Gabriel had insisted, using his authority as owner to override their concerns. Now, as the small vessel fought against the churning waters of the harbor, Teresa wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. We should make it to the marina in 10 minutes, Gabriel shouted over the storm, hunched over the controls. The restaurant is just 2 blocks from there. Teresa nodded, clinging to the handrail as another wave crashed over the bow. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Mrs. Rodriguez checking in on their estimated return time. She tucked it away, unable to respond in these conditions. When they finally reached the marina, they were both soaked to the skin. Despite the rain gear Gabriel had provided, the Mangrove Cafe's warm lights beckoned through the downpour as they hurried along the waterfront, dodging puddles and debris tossed by the wind. Sophia was waiting in a corner booth, a cup of untouched tea before her. Her eyes widened at the sight of them together. I see you two have reconnected, she said dryly as they slid into the booth. I wasn't sure you'd come, Gabriel, and I certainly didn't expect you to bring Teresa. She deserves to hear whatever you have to say, Gabriel replied. No more secrets, the waitress appeared, and Gabriel ordered coffee for both of them. Teresa studied Sophia across the table. Gabriel's sister had aged in the past 7 years. Fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but her posture still carried that unmistakable Caldwell confidence. You said you had information, Gabriel prompted once the waitress departed, about what really happened the night of the storm. Sophia glanced around the nearly empty restaurant, then leaned forward. It's not just about that night. It's about why Father was so desperate to separate you two in the first place. She pulled a leather portfolio from her bag. I've been assembling this for years, bits and pieces of information, documents I wasn't supposed to see. She slid a folder across the table. First, the medical records, Father's condition, the one Lucy has inherited. Gabriel opened the folder, and Teresa leaned close to see. Medical charts, test results, genetic profiles spanning decades. The Caldwell syndrome, Sophia said. That's what the specialists in Switzerland called it. A rare genetic disorder affecting the body's ability to produce certain enzymes. It appears in every 3rd or 4th generation. Lucy's doctor never mentioned anything about Caldwell syndrome, Teresa said, frowning. Because, officially, it doesn't exist under that name, Sophia replied. Father paid to keep it out of the medical literature, renamed it, obscured the family connection. Can't have the world knowing the mighty Caldwells carry a genetic defect, as he calls it. Gabriel's jaw tightened as he flipped through the pages. I knew about the condition, but not the extent of his cover-up. That's just the beginning, Sophia continued. After Father suffered that major episode 2 years ago, the one that landed him in the private facility, I was granted temporary power of attorney while you were in Tokyo. I used the opportunity to access his personal safe. She pulled out another document, yellowed with age. The ink faded. This is our grandmother's diary. She documented everything about her husband, our grandfather, and his struggle with the same condition. I never even met grandmother, Gabriel said, puzzled. She died before I was born. No, Sophia said quietly. She didn't die. She was committed to an institution after she threatened to go public about the disease. Grandfather had her declared mentally incompetent, and the family erased her from our history, Teresa gasped. That's horrible. That's the Caldwell way, Sophia said grimly. Protect the legacy at all costs. She pointed to a passage in the diary. Read this, Gabriel read aloud. Stanley fears the child may carry the curse. He speaks of eliminating the risk before it manifests. I fear what he might do. What child? Teresa asked. Father had a younger brother, Sophia explained. Uncle James, he began showing symptoms of the syndrome at age 5. According to grandmother's diary, he mysteriously died of pneumonia soon after. Gabriel's face drained of color. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Sophia said. I'm telling you what grandmother believed. That her own son was eliminated because he threatened the Caldwell image of perfection. A heavy silence fell over the table as the implications sank in. The waitress returned with their coffees, eyeing their solemn faces with concern before retreating. Now do you understand? Sophia continued when they were alone again. When Teresa became pregnant, Father wasn't just worried about you marrying beneath your station. He was terrified the child might manifest the syndrome, proof that the Caldwell line was tainted, as he sees it. Gabriel ran a hand over his face. So when he found out about Lucy's condition, he saw history repeating itself, Sophia finished. A Caldwell born with the syndrome, threatening to expose the secret he spent his life protecting. Teresa's mind raced, connecting pieces. That's why you've been helping us, sending money, keeping tabs on Lucy's condition? Sophia nodded. I discovered the truth about 2 years ago. I've been trying to find a way to help without exposing all of you to more danger. Gabriel leaned back, his expression grim. And now Lucy needs a transplant, and Father is likely the only viable donor. Actually, there's more, Sophia said, pulling out another file. I requested Lucy's most recent medical records from Dr. Morrison. You what? Teresa interrupted. That's confidential. Caldwell money opens many doors, Sophia said dismissively. And it's a good thing I did. Look at the genetic sequencing. They examined the documents together, rows of letters and numbers that meant little to Teresa. Gabriel, however, stiffened beside her. This can't be right, he muttered. The markers are identical to Father's. Precisely, Sophia said. The doctors believe the donor needs to be a close genetic match. But the truth is, Lucy needs Father specifically. Something about the unique mutation in his cells. Your blood type makes you incompatible for the particular type of transplant Lucy needs. Teresa felt the room spinning. So the only person who can save Lucy is the man who tried to erase her from existence. The man who orchestrated her father's disappearance. Ironic, isn't it? Sophia's smile was bitter. The same man who would have preferred Lucy never be born is now her only hope for survival. Gabriel closed the folders, his expression resolute. Then we need to approach him. Make him understand that helping Lucy is in his best interest. How? Teresa asked. From what you've both told me, Stanley Caldwell isn't exactly moved by familial sentiment. No, Gabriel agreed. But he is moved by legacy, by how the world perceives the Caldwell name. You're thinking of leveraging this information. Sophia raised an eyebrow, threatening to expose the existence of Caldwell syndrome unless he helps Lucy. It would destroy him, Gabriel said quietly. Everything he's worked for, the reputation he's built, It could also put all of you in danger, Sophia cautioned. Father doesn't respond well to threats. What choice do we have? Teresa's voice cracked with emotion. Lucy has 3 months at most. We need to try everything. Gabriel took her hand across the table, the first time he'd touched her intentionally since their confrontation on the yacht. His palm was warm, solid, real. We'll approach him together, present it not as a threat, but as an opportunity to secure his legacy through Lucy. And if he refuses, Teresa asked, then we move to Plan B. Gabriel's voice hardened. I control enough of the company now to leverage my position. I can threaten to dismantle everything he's built unless he helps his granddaughter. He'd fight you, Sophia warned. Let him try, Gabriel replied with quiet intensity. I've been playing his game for 7 years. I've learned a few moves of my own. Teresa's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. She glanced at the screen and her heart dropped. 3 missed calls from Mrs. Rodriguez followed by a text. Emergency. Lucy taken to hospital. Come quickly. She showed the phone to Gabriel, whose face went pale. We need to go, now. They slid out of the booth, Sophia gathering the documents hurriedly. I'll drive you, she offered. My car's out back. As they hurried through the still pouring rain toward Sophia's sleek BMW, Teresa felt Gabriel's hand close around hers again. For 7 years, she'd believed herself alone in the fight for Lucy's life. Now, running through the storm with Gabriel beside her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. The weight of responsibility shared, the burden halved. But as Sophia sped them toward the hospital, Teresa couldn't help wondering if this newfound alliance had come too late, if the man who had orchestrated their separation would now be the arbiter of their daughter's fate. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the road ahead in brief, blinding flashes. They were racing against time, against the storm, against the cruel twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. And somewhere, in a private medical facility, Stanley Caldwell, the man who had tried to erase Gabriel from their lives, now held Lucy's future in his hands. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Lucy's small face as she slept, an oxygen mask covering her nose and mouth. Teresa sat beside the bed, clutching her daughter's hand, while Gabriel stood at the window, his silhouette stark against the storm-darkened sky. Her oxygen levels have stabilized, Dr. Morrison explained, checking the monitors. But this episode was more severe than previous ones. The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated. How much time? Gabriel asked, his voice rough with emotion. Dr. Morrison hesitated. Without intervention. Weeks, not months. Teresa felt the room tilt. Weeks. Not enough time to navigate the labyrinth of Stanley Caldwell's manipulation. There must be something else we can do, she said desperately. Other treatments, experimental protocols. We've explored every option, Dr. Morrison replied gently. Lucy's condition is extremely rare. The transplant remains her best chance. After the doctor left, silence filled the room, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of Lucy's monitors. Gabriel moved to the bedside, studying his daughter's face with wonder and devastation. She looks like my mother, he whispered, around the mouth and chin. Teresa nodded. I've only seen photos, but I thought the same thing. Gabriel reached out tentatively, then withdrew his hand before touching Lucy. She doesn't even know me. She knows you in her dreams, Teresa said softly. She's always known something was missing. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Sophia entered, carrying a tray of coffee cups. Any change? Gabriel shook his head. She's stable, but time is running out. We need to approach Father immediately. There's a complication, Sophia said. Setting down the tray, Victoria Harrington is on her way to the hospital, apparently. The yacht security informed her that you left together during the storm. Gabriel cursed under his breath. How did she find out where we are? She has a tracking app on your phone, Sophia replied matter-of-factly. Part of your engagement agreement, I believe. Teresa raised an eyebrow. You agreed to be tracked. The appearance of a perfect union between Caldwell and Harrington Industries was important to Father, Gabriel said bitterly. The engagement came with conditions. Well, your fiancé is about to discover your dead wife and the child you never told her about, Sophia pointed out. I suggest preparing for that conversation. As if on cue, the sharp click of heels echoed down the corridor. Victoria Harrington appeared in the doorway, immaculately dressed despite the storm. her expression shifting from concern to confusion as she took in the scene before her. Nathan. Her eyes darted from Gabriel to Teresa, to the child in the bed. "What is this?" Gabriel straightened. "Victoria, I can explain." "I certainly hope so." Victoria stepped into the room, her gaze lingering on Lucy. "Who is this child?" Before Gabriel could answer, Teresa stood. "My daughter, Lucy, and Nathan's." Victoria's perfectly composed face cracked slightly. "That's impossible. Nathan would have told me if he had a child." "Victoria," Gabriel said carefully, "there are things about me, about my past, that you don't know." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Apparently so, including the fact that you've been secretly meeting with your maid." She turned to Teresa. "Though I suppose you're more than that, aren't you?" "This isn't what you think," Gabriel began. "Isn't it?" Victoria's voice was ice. "You disappeared during a storm with another woman. Now I find you at a child's bedside. A child this woman claims is yours." She laughed bitterly. "My father warned me about your humanitarian tendencies, but this is beyond even his suspicions." "Your father knows nothing about this," Gabriel said sharply. "Oh, I think he knows more than you realize," Victoria countered. "Just as my father and yours have always known more than they let on." Something in her tone made Teresa pause. "What do you mean by that?" Victoria studied Teresa with new interest. "You really don't know, do you, about the arrangement between our families?" "Victoria," Gabriel warned, "this isn't the time. On the contrary, I think it's exactly the time." Victoria moved further into the room, closing the door behind her. "How much has he told you about our engagement, Mrs. Caldwell?" "Only that it was arranged," Teresa replied cautiously. "A business merger?" Victoria smiled thinly. "A merger generations in the making. Did you know that the Harringtons and the Caldwells have been intermarrying for over a century? Carefully selected unions to preserve certain genetic traits." The room seemed to grow colder. Sophia stepped forward. "What do you know about the Caldwell genetics?" "Victoria. Everything," Victoria replied simply. "My father has the condition too, though we call it by a different name in our family records." Gabriel looked stunned. "That's impossible. The condition is specific to the Caldwell line." "Is it?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Or is that what Stanley wanted everyone to believe? The truth is, both our families carry the mutation. We've been selectively breeding for generations to control its expression." Teresa felt ill. "Selectively breeding, like animals. Like dynasties," Victoria corrected. "The condition is a double-edged sword. In its mild form, it creates enhanced cognitive capabilities, the Caldwell genius that built your family empire. In its severe form, it kills children," Teresa finished, glancing at Lucy. Victoria nodded. "Which is why the matches between our families are so carefully arranged, to minimize severe expressions while preserving the beneficial aspects." Gabriel looked shell-shocked. "You knew about this all along?" "Of course," Victoria said matter-of-factly. "Just as I've known about your true identity from the beginning. Gabriel Caldwell, presumed dead, transformed into Nathan through the miracle of modern medicine, and Stanley's ruthless determination." The monitors beside Lucy's bed beeped steadily in the stunned silence that followed. "If you knew," Teresa finally asked, "why go along with the engagement?" Victoria's perfect composure slipped slightly. "Because I had no more choice than Gabriel did. My father made it clear what would happen if I refused. So this was all a setup," Gabriel said, realization dawning. "Father choosing a Harrington bride for Nathan to ensure genetic compatibility, while simultaneously erasing your previous indiscretion." Victoria glanced at Teresa. "No offense intended." "Charming," Teresa muttered. Victoria moved closer to Lucy's bed, studying the sleeping child with clinical interest. "The disease has progressed significantly. You're seeking Stanley as a donor." Gabriel nodded cautiously. "He's the closest genetic match. We believe he's Lucy's only hope." Victoria considered this. "He'll never agree willingly, not unless there's something in it for him." "I'm prepared to leverage my position in the company," Gabriel said, "even threaten exposure of the Caldwell syndrome." Victoria laughed sharply. "You think that would work against Stanley? The man has contingency plans for his contingency plans." "Then what do you suggest?" Teresa asked, watching Victoria warily. Victoria turned to face them, calculation evident in her expression. "I propose an alliance. I help you get Stanley to agree to the transplant, and in return," she paused, looking directly at Gabriel, "you release me from our engagement and support my bid to take over my father's company." Gabriel looked startled. "You want out of the engagement? I've played my role in this dynasty drama for long enough," Victoria said firmly. "I have ambitions of my own that don't include being a genetic breeding mare for the next generation of Caldwell-Harrington offspring." Sophia stepped forward. "And how exactly would you help us convince Stanley?" A slow smile spread across Victoria's face. "Because I have the one thing Stanley values above the Caldwell name itself. Proof of his involvement in financial crimes that would put him in prison for the rest of his natural life." She pulled out her phone, displaying a series of documents. "Insurance, you might say, against my own father's machinations, but it works just as well against Stanley." Gabriel studied Victoria with new respect. "You've been planning this for a while." "Years," Victoria acknowledged, "waiting for the right opportunity." She glanced at Lucy. "It seems we've all been playing parts in Stanley's grand design. Perhaps it's time we wrote our own ending to this story." Teresa looked between them, hope and suspicion warring within her. "Can we trust her?" "No," Sophia answered bluntly. "But right now, we don't have many options." Gabriel approached Victoria slowly. "What exactly do you propose?" "We approach Stanley together," Victoria said. "Present him with a choice. Help save Lucy and gracefully retire from both our lives, or face federal prosecution and watch the careful Caldwell-Harrington alliance crumble very publicly." "He could still refuse," Teresa pointed out. "He won't," Victoria said confidently, "because I'll make sure he understands that Lucy represents something he's wanted his entire life, a genetic legacy without the severe manifestation of the condition." She gestured to the medical charts at the foot of Lucy's bed. "The latest tests show she has the cognitive enhancements without the most damaging physical symptoms. She's what both our families have been breeding for generations." Gabriel looked disgusted. "You're suggesting we sell my daughter to him as some kind of genetic achievement. I'm suggesting we give him a narrative he can accept," Victoria clarified. "One that allows him to help Lucy while believing it serves his greater purpose." Lucy stirred in her sleep, her small hand tightening around Teresa's. The adults fell silent, watching as the child's eyes fluttered open briefly before closing again. "Time is running out," Victoria said softly. "What's your decision?" Gabriel looked at Teresa, the question in his eyes clear. It was her choice too, perhaps more hers than anyone's. Teresa gazed down at her daughter, so small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. 7 years she'd fought alone to keep Lucy alive. 7 years of surgeries and medications and late-night emergency room visits. Now their best hope lay in an alliance with the very people who had torn her family apart. "When can we see Stanley?" she asked quietly. Victoria's smile was triumphant. "I'll make the arrangements immediately. The Caldwell Private Clinic is only 2 hours from here by helicopter." Outside, the storm had finally begun to subside, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. A new day was coming. Whether it would bring salvation or deeper despair remained to be seen. The Caldwell Private Medical Facility rose from the Florida coastline like a modernist fortress, all gleaming glass and sharp angles, surrounded by manicured gardens and a discreet security perimeter. The helicopter Victoria had arranged touched down on the rooftop landing pad, just as the morning sun broke fully through the dissipating storm clouds. "Remember," Victoria cautioned as they disembarked, "Stanley doesn't know we're coming. The element of surprise is essential." Teresa clutched the folder containing Lucy's medical records against her chest. They'd left Lucy in Sophia's care at the hospital, promising to return with news, hopefully good news, by afternoon. The weight of that promise hung heavy over Teresa as they were escorted through sterile corridors by silent staff who seemed unsurprised by Victoria's unannounced arrival. "Mr. Caldwell is having his morning physical therapy," a nurse informed them as they approached a restricted wing. "He doesn't typically receive visitors until afternoon. He'll see us now," Victoria said with such authority that the nurse merely nodded and swiped her keycard across the security panel. The rehabilitation room was spacious and filled with state-of-the-art medical equipment. At its center, Stanley Caldwell, the man who had orchestrated the destruction of Teresa's family, was walking slowly on a treadmill, supported by a harness system. Even diminished by illness, he emanated power, His steel gray hair was immaculately groomed, and he wore tailored pajamas rather than a hospital gown, maintaining appearances even here, in his gilded prison. Stanley's eyes widened momentarily when they entered, then narrowed as he took in the unlikely trio. "Nathan," he said, his voice stronger than his frail appearance suggested. "This is unexpected." His gaze slid to Teresa, and recognition flashed across his features. "Ms. Mendoza." He didn't bother hiding his distaste as he used her maiden name, deliberately ignoring her marriage to his son. "Or is it still Caldwell? A name you never deserved to carry?" Teresa stiffened but remained silent, letting Gabriel take the lead as planned. "Hello, Father," Gabriel said, emphasizing his true identity. "It's been a while." Stanley's expression didn't change, but he motioned to the physical therapist. "Leave us." When the staff had departed, Stanley stepped off the treadmill, reaching for a cane propped against nearby equipment. "I should have known you couldn't maintain the charade forever," he said, his tone almost conversational. "What gave you away?" "Nothing gave me away," Gabriel replied coolly. "I chose to reveal myself." Stanley's gaze shifted to Victoria. "And you, my dear?" "I expected better from Harrison Harrington's daughter." Victoria smiled thinly. "My father taught me to recognize which way the wind is blowing. And right now, it's not in your favor, Stanley." "Is that so?" Stanley lowered himself into a leather chair, gesturing for them to sit in the chairs arranged opposite him. None of them moved. "Well then, let's not waste time. What brings this unlikely alliance to my doorstep?" Gabriel stepped forward. "We need something from you. Something only you can provide." Stanley's laugh was brittle. How intriguing. The prodigal son returns not for forgiveness, but to make demands. His gaze hardened. "What could I possibly have that you need badly enough to risk exposing yourself?" "A compatible donor match," Teresa spoke up, opening the folder and extending Lucy's medical file toward him. "For your granddaughter." Stanley didn't reach for the file. "I have no granddaughter." "You've known about her all along," Gabriel said. "Your men have been watching her for years. Observing potential threats is simply good business," Stanley replied dismissively. "That doesn't make the child family." Teresa felt rage rising within her. This man had nearly destroyed her family, had separated a father from his child, and now sat in judgment as if he were the wronged party. "Her name is Lucy," Teresa said, her voice steady despite her anger. "She's 6 years old. She loves drawing, and the ocean, and stories about brave princesses who save themselves, and she's dying from the same condition you have, the Caldwell syndrome." Something flickered in Stanley's eyes at the mention of the disease name. Surprise, perhaps, that they knew the family term for it. "Many children die every day," he said coldly. "What makes this one special?" "She carries the Caldwell-Harrington genetic marker," Victoria interjected smoothly, stepping forward. "The specific variation both our families have been breeding for generations." This caught Stanley's attention. He sat straighter, finally reaching for the medical file. "Explain." Victoria moved closer, pointing to specific sections of Lucy's genetic testing. "See for yourself. Enhanced cognitive markers without the most severe physical deterioration. She's manifesting the positive aspects of the mutation while showing a delayed onset of the debilitating symptoms." Stanley studied the file with growing interest. "These cognitive tests, they're extraordinary for a child her age. She taught herself to read at 3, Teresa said quietly. She can do complex math in her head. The doctors called her gifted before the symptoms began interfering with her development." Stanley looked up, studying Teresa with new calculation in his eyes. "Your genetic contribution must have interacted unusually well with the Caldwell markers. She's not a science experiment," Gabriel snapped. "She's your granddaughter, and she needs your help." Stanley closed the file slowly. "Even if what you say is true, even if this child represents a favorable genetic expression, why should I help? What do I gain?" Victoria stepped forward. "A legacy, Stanley. The one thing you've always wanted." She produced a flash drive from her purse. "Or, if you prefer, you gain freedom from federal prosecution for the securities fraud you faked your death to escape. I have all the evidence here, enough to put you away for the rest of your natural life. Your choice." Stanley's expression hardened. "You dare threaten me, in my own facility. It's not a threat, Gabriel said evenly. It's a choice. Help save Lucy's life, and will ensure your reputation remains intact. Refuse, and Victoria releases everything she has to the SEC and the press. And what guarantee do I have that you won't expose me anyway? Once you've gotten what you want, Stanley demanded. None, Teresa said simply. You'll have to trust us. Just like I had to trust you wouldn't kill my husband when he went fishing that night. Just like Gabriel had to trust you wouldn't harm me and our unborn child when he agreed to become Nathan. Stanley studied her with grudging respect. You've grown a backbone since our last meeting. 7 years of fighting alone for my child will do that, Teresa replied. A heavy silence filled the room as Stanley weighed his options. Outside the wide windows, the ocean stretched toward the horizon, the same waters that had nearly claimed Gabriel's life at this man's command. The procedure has risks, Stanley finally said, for the donor especially. We're aware, Gabriel nodded. Dr. Morrison has outlined everything. Stanley's gaze moved between the three of them, calculation evident in his expression. I'll need conditions of my own, guarantees about my continued privacy, my control of certain Caldwell assets, and, his eyes settled on Teresa, access to the child for observation. Teresa felt her skin crawl at the thought. Supervised visits only, and only if Lucy agrees. And you will sign over control of Caldwell Maritime to Gabriel, Victoria added smoothly. Officially this time, not the puppet arrangement you've maintained. Stanley's eyes narrowed. You've thought this through. We've had time to prepare, Gabriel replied. While you were hiding here, playing dead, I was learning how to run your empire. It turns out I'm quite good at it. A look almost like pride flickered across Stanley's face before vanishing behind his usual mask of cold calculation. Very well. I'll require my attorneys to draw up appropriate documents. But in principle, I accept your terms. The tension in the room shifted, not dissipating but transforming. Stanley pressed a button on his chair, summoning his medical team. Tell Dr. Harris to prepare for preliminary compatibility testing. It seems I may be donating bone marrow to a previously unknown granddaughter. As medical staff entered the room, Gabriel pulled Teresa aside, his voice low. Don't celebrate yet. He's agreed too easily. I know, Teresa whispered back. But what choice do we have? Stanley was watching them, his expression unreadable. One more condition, he called across the room. I want to meet her. Before the procedure, I want to see this miraculous grandchild for myself. Teresa felt her protective instincts flare. Lucy is too weak to travel. Then I shall come to her, Stanley said with finality. Tomorrow morning, either I meet her, or there is no deal. Gabriel's hand found Teresa's, squeezing gently in support. Fine, but we'll be present the entire time. Stanley smiled thinly. I would expect nothing less. His gaze moved to Teresa, something almost like curiosity in his eyes. I find myself wondering what kind of child you and my son produced. Whether she's truly worthy of the Caldwell name. She's not looking for your approval, Teresa said evenly. Just your bone marrow. As they left the facility, the morning sun now high in the cloudless sky, Victoria turned to them. He's planning something. Stanley never surrenders this easily. I know, Gabriel agreed grimly. But he's also curious about Lucy now. That gives us leverage we didn't have before. Teresa looked out at the ocean as they boarded the helicopter, thinking of the storm that had started all of this 7 years ago. Another storm was brewing now. Not of wind and rain, but of schemes and counter-schemes, with Lucy caught in the center. Whatever he's planning, she said quietly, we'll be ready. The hospital room had been transformed overnight. Colorful drawings covered the walls. Lucy's artwork displayed proudly, and vases of fresh flowers brightened every available surface. Sophia and Mrs. Rodriguez had worked together to make the sterile space more welcoming for the momentous meeting ahead. Lucy sat propped up in bed, her condition temporarily stabilized by a new combination of medications. Teresa had spent hours explaining the situation in terms her daughter could understand, that her grandfather, a man they'd never met, was coming to visit, and that he might be able to help make her better. Is he nice? Lucy had asked, her hazel eyes, so like Gabriel's, wide with curiosity. Teresa had hesitated. He's complicated, but he wants to meet you very much. Now, as they waited for Stanley's arrival, Teresa smoothed Lucy's dark curls and adjusted the special dress they'd bought for the occasion, a blue sundress with embroidered stars that Lucy had insisted on because it looks like the night sky. Gabriel paced by the window, tension evident in every line of his body. He'd spent much of the previous evening with Lucy, beginning the delicate process of explaining who he really was. To Teresa's surprise, Lucy had accepted the news with the simple logic of childhood. "I knew you were my daddy. I saw you in my dreams." A soft knock at the door announced Victoria's arrival. "They're here," she said quietly. Stanley insisted on bringing his personal physician and attorney. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Of course he did. Remember," Victoria cautioned, "no matter what he says or does, we need him, at least until the transplant is complete." Teresa nodded, steeling herself for the encounter. She'd faced Stanley Caldwell once before, 7 years ago, when she'd gone to the Caldwell mansion seeking help after Gabriel's disappearance. The memory of his cold dismissal still burned. The door opened again, and Stanley entered, supported by an elegant cane but otherwise moving with surprising strength for a man battling a degenerative condition. His personal physician followed closely, along with a stern-faced man Teresa assumed was the attorney. Stanley's gaze swept the room, assessing before landing on Lucy for a moment. So brief Teresa almost missed it. His composed expression faltered. Something like recognition flickered in his eyes. "So," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "this is the child." Lucy studied him with open curiosity. "Are you really my grandfather?" Stanley approached the bed slowly. "I am Stanley Caldwell. Your father is my son. He doesn't look like you," Lucy observed with a child's bluntness. "Daddy's smile is nicer." A surprised chuckle escaped Victoria, quickly stifled behind her hand. Stanley raised an eyebrow but didn't seem offended. "Intelligence and directness," he noted. "Caldwell traits. Both of them." He lowered himself carefully into the chair beside Lucy's bed, studying her with the same clinical interest he'd shown her medical file. "I understand you're quite good at mathematics." "Young lady," Lucy nodded. "I like numbers. They make patterns." "Indeed they do." Stanley reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small notebook. "Perhaps you could help me with a problem. I've been trying to solve it myself, but my doctors tell me I need to rest instead of working." He opened the notebook and showed Lucy a sequence of numbers. Teresa recognized it as an advanced mathematical pattern, one far beyond the capabilities of most 6-year-olds. Lucy studied it for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a Fibonacci sequence but with a twist," she said finally. "The next number should be 377, 610, and then 987. Stanley's expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. Not just calculation now, but genuine interest. "Correct. And can you tell me what's special about these numbers?" "They're everywhere in nature," Lucy replied, warming to the subject. "The way flowers grow their petals, and shells make their spirals. Mommy showed me at the beach." Stanley glanced at Teresa, reassessing her. Did she now? The attorney cleared his throat meaningfully. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps we should proceed with the matters at hand." Yes. Stanley waved him off impatiently. He turned back to Lucy. "Do you understand why I'm here, child?" Lucy nodded solemnly. "You're sick like me, but different too. The doctors say you can help make me better because we have the same special blood." A simplified explanation, but essentially correct, Stanley conceded. "And do you know what will happen if I help you?" Gabriel stepped forward, tension radiating from him. "Father." Stanley held up a hand. Silencing him, his focus remained on Lucy. "I'll get better," Lucy answered. "And you'll get tired for a while, but you'll be okay too." She tilted her head, studying him. "Mommy says it will hurt a little, but that brave people do hard things to help others." Something shifted in Stanley's eyes, a flicker of emotion Teresa couldn't identify. For a moment, she glimpsed the man Gabriel's mother might have loved, before ambition and obsession with legacy had twisted him. "Your mother is correct," Stanley said finally. "Brave people do hard things." He turned to the physician. "Begin the final compatibility tests. I want to proceed as quickly as possible." The attorney stepped forward. "Documents in hand. Before we proceed, the agreements we discussed can wait," Stanley interrupted, surprising everyone. "The child's condition takes precedence. For the next hour, Doctors moved in and out of the room, drawing blood from both Stanley and Lucy, confirming what they already suspected, that Stanley's bone marrow was indeed a perfect match for the transplant Lucy desperately needed. As the medical team prepared to escort Stanley back to his facility to begin the donation process, he paused at Lucy's bedside one final time. "You have your grandmother's eyes," he said quietly. "I hadn't expected that." Lucy smiled tiredly, the excitement of the day taking its toll. Was she nice? A shadow crossed Stanley's face. She was. Extraordinary. Perhaps someday I'll tell you about her. As he turned to leave, Stanley beckoned Gabriel to follow him into the hallway. Teresa, unwilling to let Gabriel face his father alone, joined them. "The legal documents are being revised," Stanley said without preamble. "I'll sign control of Caldwell Maritime over to you officially, not as Nathan, but as Gabriel Caldwell, returned from a 7-year absence." Gabriel looked stunned. "You're acknowledging my real identity, publicly." Stanley's smile was thin. "The prodigal son returns, having survived a traumatic accident and amnesia. A much more palatable story than the truth, don't you think? The attorneys will create a suitable narrative." "And what about Lucy?" Teresa asked. "What are your expectations there?" Stanley studied her with new respect. "I underestimated you, Miss Mendoza. A mistake I won't repeat." He tapped his cane thoughtfully. "As for Lucy, I would like to be permitted to assist with her education. Fund appropriate opportunities, nothing more. No manipulation," Gabriel insisted. "No using her as some kind of genetic experiment. The child has the Caldwell intellect without the worst of our affliction," Stanley said simply. "That alone is worth nurturing, regardless of any previous complications." The transplant procedure was scheduled for the following day. As doctors prepared both Stanley and Lucy, the legal teams worked through the night, crafting agreements and narratives that would reshape the Caldwell legacy. 3 months later, Lucy Caldwell celebrated her 7th birthday on the beach behind the family's new home, a modest but comfortable house on the Gulf Coast. Far from Key West and its painful memories, her grandfather attended briefly, bringing a telescope for studying the stars you love so much, before departing with his ever-present medical team. Gabriel, legally restored to his true identity, stood with Teresa at the water's edge, watching their daughter, now in remission, her strength returning daily, as she built an elaborate sand castle with Sophia. "Do you think he's really changed?" Teresa asked, leaning against Gabriel's shoulder. "Or is this just another long game he's playing?" Gabriel considered the question, watching his father's car disappear down the coastal highway. "I think meeting Lucy changed something in him. Whether it's enough to truly redeem him, time will tell." Teresa twined her fingers with his, the matching wedding bands they'd exchanged in a small ceremony the previous month, catching the sunset light. "Either way," she said softly, "we've won. We got our family back." Gabriel kissed her temple gently. "And this time, no storm is going to tear us apart." On the horizon, a ship's lights blinked as it sailed toward open water. Not the Sat Helena. Victoria had claimed that as part of her settlement with both Stanley and her own father, but a smaller vessel that Gabriel had purchased for their family. Its name, painted in bold blue letters on the stern, was visible even from shore. The Lucy Star. A promise fulfilled, a family restored, and a future that, at long last, belonged to them alone.